All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We are chatting about the uh, post election real estate market projections, so what we anticipate transpiring over the course of the remainder of the year and into next. We'll bring on our co host here. So, obviously, we'll be talking about the lending side, what to anticipate on the buying side, and then what the home sellers can anticipate going into next year. With that, I'll bring Chase on. How you doing today, Chase?
I'm doing well, Jerod. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm pretty
Good.
good. We're kind of in that shoulder time of the year where we're not quite, summer, fall, but we're not quite winter yet
Yeah.
either. So I'm in pause mode, is what I'm saying.
All your
So,
favorite activities are paused until you either get some snow or some warmer weather.
yeah, yeah. I love when the trees change colors, but that's such a brief period of time, and then
Yeah.
you can't ride your bike anymore, and you certainly can't get on your board. Although we are skiing here next week, I hear.
We're seeing some snow too. Like I have friends in McCall and that definitely seeing some early snowfall. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let's do a couple housekeeping items here, and then get into the conversation. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jerod Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today, in large part collaboration with Chase, is the perfect home buying process. We have a current offer of up to $500 on your appraisal and up to $500 on your home inspection. At closing, and then we just have a bunch of tools that we've created over the years in regards to obviously property searches, things like that, but a very lengthy relocation and lifestyle guide. No obligation consultation to kind of see where you're at and get started, and then some real estate secrets that we feel that you should know, and then a weekly podcast series we'll send out to hopefully answer the majority of the questions that you might have. Feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about taking advantage of these tools and offers. Other than that, I'll bring Chase back on, and we typically try to avoid getting into the whole politics weeds. So I think we'll continue to do that today. But clearly, the election's done. Uh, you know, a lot of different opinions on either side, but I think the resounding takeaway is the uncertainty of who's going to be in office is going to be gone, and we have a pretty darn good idea because we've seen the policies. We had already seen the policies of both parties already, so we could kind of know what they were going to do anyway. But now we know you know, who's going to be pushing the agenda forward.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in that transitional period, where we're waiting to see what the current administration does as they move out, and then we're starting to see what some of the policies are going to look like with the new administration. So it's interesting times for sure. I think there's a lot of shakeup going on.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll be curious if you're inclined to agree with me that there's been a lot that's changed, but there hasn't been much that's changed. Right? We've heard a lot of the nominations. We've heard, a lot of shifts in, global, politics. Some of the war stuff has shifted. But I think on
Mhm.
the real estate side, a lot of what we've talked about in the past is the same kind of the volatility and the interest rates not shifting the ways that we would think it could and should or just
Yeah.
yet. Um, but we're seeing good indicators and then some not so good indicators. So it's just weird. Is that how you'd sum it up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all love to see interest rates go back down to twos, which, I don't think is going to happen again. It's not what we're expecting in the market. It's going to be a while, I think, before they start to trend down, and there's going to be quite a bit of volatility in the meantime.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, I was definitely a proponent of you know, economically speaking, with all the signs and everything that was going on, that we would be in a better position interest rate wise. I think there's a lot of external factors that are still coming to play that are affecting our markets here. Not just the election, not just politics, but all of that kind of does play a role
Yeah.
in what's going on.
Yeah, well, I think it's fairly safe to say that, we typically end up on these kind of projection conversations going back to the basics, right? Supply and demand, and do we see demand? Do we see pent up demand? Is there any reason why inventories levels should change drastically? If, traditionally it hasn't. So we've kind of just see that builders are trying to keep up but yet people are moving in faster. So back to the really, there's no reason why we think that values should drop at all. If anything, they're rebounding over the correction we had the last year and a half. We're seeing them steadily, climb, and I'm not seeing anybody that's forecasting that wouldn't continue to be the case. And some even saying that we should see that appreciation accelerate. Not obnoxiously so, but some.
Yeah, I think we can kind of expect to stay on that trend. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, we have seen inventory creep up a little bit, right? Which is what we needed. The higher interest rates, we don't have enough. Even with the increase that we've seen, we don't have enough inventory for long periods of time. And as interest rates come down, over however long that takes, there's still a ton of demand out there. Um, and again, not to feel like I'm beating a dead horse every time I say this, but that's just statistically, we have more home buyers than this country has ever seen right now with the generation that's of buying age.
Yeah.
And so that, just when you take everything, strip everything out and just look at the economics and the statistics of it, there's more home buyers. And we have some other players in the market, right? In corporations that are buying up big swaths of single family. And so the rental market, is increasing, but that affects the folks that want to buy, right? So as far as purchase inventory for the foreseeable future, there's not a quick, easy solve to that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we go back, before we get into predictions, talk about a little bit what's transpired over the course of the year, and that is, and you just alluded to it, that builders are very bullish on our market. We've got some national builders coming in now, like the Lennars and whatnot. Even some of the regional ones are very bullish on what's going on. Our biggest builder, CBH, Hubble Homes, they've been building in anticipation of the market, the demand coming online. But it hasn't come online fast enough. So they've, and I was looking up earlier today, and I've got some anecdotal evidence of that there's still promotions out there. So when they build and they're not quite offloading inventory as quick as they'd like, then they keep these promotions going, right? You're talking about interest rate buy downs. You're talking about credits towards yards and appliances or blinds or whatever. So I still see them active in the entry level market. We're getting towards the latter part of November. If I had to guess, I think we'll see them through December and maybe January, because just even seasonally, that's been a kind of our slower time.
Yep.
But I wonder your thoughts. Do you also kind of see that those promotions are probably going to go away, and the deeper we get into spring, that
I
those
would
incentives are going to
expect.
go away?
Yeah, I would expect. I think it's going to be tied to the rate a bit,
Mm-hmm.
to mortgage rates, right? So, hopefully we're going to get some relief. I think concessions will continue. So it's two-part, right? And we've talked about this before, but it helps the buyers get in, but it also helps the builders maintaining a price level with their homes that they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to,
Right.
right? So they don't want to sell a whole bunch instead of cutting the price, and then now their market, has taken a decrease. They can do seller concessions and maintain that market for when it heats back up, right? Maintain that market level price for when it heats back up.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's,
I think
it's
I
both
mentioned it.
sides.
What's
And
that?
so it's both sides of that transaction, and they'll for selfish reasons, I think they'll keep it going as well.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. We've mentioned it a couple times, and it might not immediately make sense, but builders have to maintain their price point because their comps get adjusted. And if they, downwardly adjust one or two, then the rest in that community can get dinged pretty heavily. So
Right.
the way that they'll encourage the market to buy is to offer incentives that they kept the same price point, but they gave them a seller credit, either buying down an interest rate or the incentives that I talked about, credits. So what I'm saying is, when you talk to us and you think our price is coming down, that's not the conversation. The
Right.
conversation is how deep is the credit, the seller concession.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really, it's good for both sides. It is. There's
Hmm.
benefits for both sides because realistically, with the amount of concession that you can get currently, that allows for a pretty significant buy down or temporary buy down, to where you're saving more in a monthly payment than if they were to cut the sales price that much anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and it really kind of addresses the whole, catch 22 of, hey, I don't want the prices to go up, but I also don't want to buy when the interest rates are high. When they're
Right.
offering to buy your rate down, you're buying it before the prices start to go up. Again, we're seeing it go up, and everybody anticipates it continuing to go up. But you're buying a rate down, either permanently or temporarily, right? If you think they're going to go way down, do it temporarily for the next bit and then refinance later, or do a permanent about to where, depending on what the incentive is, about
Where
to where you think it's going to land anyway, and then you don't have to refinance later. So I think
Right.
the first time home buyer, and even to some move up, we're seeing those promotions kind of stick, and I think they'll stick for the next couple of months. Move up in luxury, um, I think it depends. So what I mean by that is I've already seen some of the, luxury, we're talking, eight, 900 million, 1.2. They're already taking away their incentives. They're seeing some traction. Their homes are selling. That those buyers aren't really kind of as susceptible to interest rate fluctuations. They just want to know kind of generally where we're going,
Right.
with the economy and, with politics and all that. So I don't think you're going to get as good at deals there. However, on the resale side, in those price points, depending on when a homeowner put the home on the market, they're kind of chasing this stigma of days on market. Why hasn't it sold yet? What's wrong with it?
Right.
And it's kind of a death spiral thing. So there's not necessarily anything wrong with the home, other than it's just been on the market longer than they think it should. And
Yeah.
I've got a buyer. I literally was telling you before we started the show here. Returned offer signed, so we're in contract on a home that kind of fits in that category, and we're getting it at a really great price
Yeah.
because of the scenario I just described to you. Perfectly good home, just put on the market while things were a little, soft, and sat there for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many factors that go into it, right? Like, but ultimately, I think I just don't. There's not an easy quick solve for the inventory issue, and so the appreciation is just going to continue. It's what we've seen, right? The market's not worse off than it was 6 months ago, and during that period when things were supposed to be, so bad, when the picture was painted that everything was so bad, we still had a 5% year over year increase in pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that appreciation is still there. So it's still, there's good reason that everybody's still bullish on the housing market.
Yeah, even in a softer market where you're not sure and interest rates are going up, and now, the lender's saying, hey, and the realtor are still saying there was appreciation. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, Clearly it's strong enough for values, and i.e. prices, to go up. What we think is going to happen next year, I think, is going to be way more noticeable, to the point where you're like, oh man, did I miss the boat? You know,
Yeah.
and in my experience, the deeper you get into spring, early summer, that's when the demand picks up, because people are going to want to get their kids in a different school district, over the course of the summer. Um, we are still anticipating interest rates to go down. I know we've been talking about that for a minute, but um, I,
There's,
what do you think?
I just think there's so much that goes into that, right? Like, I'm seeing a lot of noise out there now. It's like, oh, you said they were going to go be down, and agents and lenders are just selfish and they don't know what they're talking about. That's not the case. We were actually using market data, unfortunately, in economics, there's a lot of factors that go into that and that can change the trajectory of where things are moving, and the additional money that we've spent and set overseas, the wars that are going on over there,
Yeah.
uh, the election period, like all of that. I mean, key factor, right? Like, so the Federal Reserve lowers the Fed funds rate twice now, right? The first time by 50 basis points and the second time by 25 basis points, which immediately gives consumers more money to spend, or more savings, right? Because
Mm.
that immediately affects their credit card payments, the consumer loans, like automobiles, personal loans, things of that nature.
Yeah.
That directly affects that, and ultimately we expected mortgage rates to follow suit. But what happened, and this is it's pretty interesting, to think about, is going into the election, the last time that Trump was elected, there was a massive increase in the stock market. So you can go back in time, like over the last couple months, and you can see when the market decided that he was going to win, because they started pulling money from treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities and putting it in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why mortgage rates went up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 48 hours after
24. Like
24.
the next day, yeah, stock
Yeah,
market
there was
1,500.
one point. I think the number I heard is there was 1.6 trillion in wealth created in that 24 hours
Isn't that
because of the money
crazy?
that people had shifted to the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think your point is needs to be well understood that in a normal time, there's levers that are pulled that you can look at to make somewhat of an educated prediction. But when you've got all these extenuating circumstances, you're like, okay, did that counter the other levers? And if it's so, to what extent? And
Right.
there's just been so many things that, hey, it should have gone this direction, but for whatever reason, this issue came up, and now, you know,
Yeah.
so it's just tough to call. But my
It is.
point is, those extenuating circumstances are going away.
Yeah. I do think that it will, and this is just me personally, just looking back in history, and like realistically, for rates to get to where they need to be or where they should be at this point,
Hmm.
I think that we've masked a lot of things, right? And this is just my personal opinion. Um, we've, through COVID and everything else, we've masked a lot of where the economy is, and we buoyed it up a little falsely. And so I think we need to feel a little bit of recession.
Yeah.
We actually need to feel it and see it, and I think that'll be stripped away in the upcoming months, and we'll get just a little bit worse before we get better, but then better's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And that's the typical any way anything works, right? Thinking of it like a tidal wave. It builds and builds and builds and crests, and then it falls, and then it builds again.
Yeah.
And so that's the economy is a living, breathing thing, and that's the process.
Yeah, well, I think you're talking exactly what we preach all the time: is just be prepared.
Yep.
Get in, talk with you, be positioned, improve your position, whether it's your credit score or your savings, or whatever lever it is that we can help pull for you to put you in a better position, and then capitalize, jump on that as we see things materialize. Again, I think that early to mid spring will be a good time, because we think interest rates will come down. I think people are going to start putting inventory on. Usually, in my experience, the demand picks up shortly after the inventory starts coming on. So there's kind of
Right.
this sweet spot of, oh, okay, I see houses coming on the market before people are starting to really look around. And that obviously that gets worse in the highly competitive years, when you're like, oh man, everybody and their dog's looking at a house, and now I'm in a competitive situation. I don't think we're back to that yet. But being positioned so that you can watch the inventory come on and jump on something that you find that you like.
Yeah. And it's again, it's like you say, educate yourself on where you're at financially, know what you're comfortable with affording, because along those lines as well, I do believe there's going to be deals had through the winter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you're in a position now where you want to move up or buy your first one, and you can make the payment with these rates, it's going to be a good investment, right? Because
Yeah.
that real estate is going to appreciate. Um, I just think that that's the first step, is just knowing where you're at and
Yep.
what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. What's been your feedback or what you're seeing in the way of the limits? I know either the last podcast or the time before, you were sharing kind of what we think the limits are going to be. Are you seeing any wavering on those, or are they still pretty much the same?
No, I think we're going to be. I think we're going to end up in the same spot. I fairly comfortably. FHA has got some predictions loosely. They're usually later to come on with their increases, and those predictions are usually fairly accurate, just because they're based off of a percentage of the of the increases in wealth or the increases in wage and that appreciation. So I think they'll be I think they'll be right where we were at, and I'm trying to remember that exact number. Was it like eight? Was it 812 for conventional?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall, but I think the overall kind of summary was that we're now at a point where our limits here in Idaho are keeping up with where the market's at. Where there's been some years you're like, man, the limits just haven't been increased at the rate that our home values, home prices go up. But I think I hear you saying that going forward, it sure seems like we're getting our head around where the limits need to be prior to each year and setting them where they match where the buyers are at.
Yeah, the last few years especially, they've been really good about it and keeping up. It's yeah, the that can be pretty limiting, especially to our first time home buyer situations, right? We want to keep them, in the loan programs that benefit them the most financially,
Yeah.
and increasing those loan limits, especially in the Govy area with FHA, VA, USDA. Those, keeping on top of those really helps those first time home buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. We're at 22 minutes. It's funny. We always try to keep it under 30, and usually we go over. Maybe this one's going to go under, but we just really wanted to come in with a quick snapshot of our thoughts post-election, kind of what we think is going to happen. Obviously, things are unfolding a little bit like we thought, not in other areas. I guess my crystal ball isn't as perfect as I'd like it to be.
They never are, right?
Right. Right. But I think it's fairly safe to say that a lot of those variables or those extenuating circumstances, into 2025 are going away. So the things that we usually lean on to make these predictions are going to be more consistent
Yeah,
and readable.
and I can't reiterate enough. Like, I think it really comes down to, what are your goals? What are your family's goals? And where are you at financially, right? Because anytime, when looking at real estate as an investment, which is how you should approach it, whether it's your primary residence or not, you know, being in a position to invest and is that investment going to pay off?
Yeah.
That's how you should approach it. So if you can buy now and you can save 50 to 100,000 of what those prices, of what that home will be in the spring or midsummer next year,
Yeah.
sounds like a pretty good investment, right? So just know where you're at. Educate
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, so I would say, for the folks that want to capitalize something on the winter and you want a really good deal, let's look at homes that have been sitting there for a minute. Again, I don't think there's, in most cases, anything really wrong with them. They just kind of got put on the market at the wrong time, or maybe the seller overpriced it out of the gates and thinking that they could get more than they should. So it's a perfectly good home, but move on it. I think the builder's going to have some promos for, and I'm just summarizing things here, for the next month or two. But I think for the most part, that builder inventory is going to be consumed. That resale inventory that's been languishing is going to be consumed. And then really, the builders are going to put a big thrust in to get things going in the spring, when traditionally inventory demand picks up. And then obviously the resale market, that's just when they put it on the market anyway, because they don't want people traipsing through their house when it's, cold and dreary, and they don't want to move when it's cold and dreary. So I really think that sweet spot of, kind of mid-late spring, doing something before that, either on the new construction or resale, would benefit you the most. Is that kind of where your head's at too?
Yeah, I think so. I cyclically, like, you can just look back, and that's to a T describes our market, right? Good and bad times. So I don't think there's any reason to move from those trends.
Yeah, yeah. Well, very good. Well, thanks for jumping on today, Chase, giving us insight into what your thoughts are, in general and on the lending side. Everybody, please feel free to reach out directly to Chase or myself. As I said, we always recommend that your first conversation needs to be with Chase to get your head around where you're at, what things you can improve, and be positioned well. And then once, that's done, then Chase will give us our marching orders about what we can, get out there and do in the market. And maybe it's jump on it right away. Maybe it's waiting a little bit till things, get a little more firmed up or cleaned up or what have you. So we're always available.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure, Jerod. I appreciate you continuing this process to give us an opportunity to chat with people. It's always.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll look to see you next week.
All right. Sounds good.
Everybody have a blessed one. Thanks.